Hi guys, it's me, Charles Leclerc, and welcome to the qualifying watch along for the 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. I hope all of you are doing well on this, mid-November, pretty much weekend now. Hopefully you're all having a good time, and no matter what time it is in your part of the world or where you're from, hopefully you're all getting on well, given whatever circumstances you are going through. And, yeah, here we are for qualifying straight away on a Friday evening. Of course, it is a sprint race weekend, and that is why we have qualifying on a Friday. Sprint race will be tomorrow, about a couple hours later than this current time tomorrow. And, of course, the race will be starting exactly at this time on Sunday. But, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here in qualifying, especially considering practice one, as I'll get into in a moment, the results of practice one and what happened, and I'll go through, you know, what teams to look out for, I guess you could say, in qualifying if it is in dry conditions. But looking at the weather forecast, maybe not for the entire session, but we are probably later in the session for sure. You know, Q2, Q3 definitely, probably going to get some rain in qualifying today. I'm not sure how much rain. There has been reports of heavy rain possibly. Hopefully not too heavy to the point of, you know, where we have delays and stuff like that. But looking at the forecast, as I did about an hour or so before this stream started, we're probably going to see some rain in qualifying today. And it really could mix things up for the weekend, because we get a mixed up grid for the sprint. And then the sprint, even tomorrow, there's a possibility of rain. And then, you know, that could affect things going into the Grand Prix on the Sunday. And, of course, the more it rains, it makes things more exciting. And even if the race on Sunday is dry, like it is going to be, we think, at the moment, the race is going to be dry. What that means is there won't be a lot of rubber down on the track. And that'll really make things quite exciting. So there has been some races in the past where we've had, you know, wet qualifying sessions. And then in the race on the Sunday, because of that lack of rubber on the track, it's made the track a lot less, you know, grippy. And it's really made things very exciting. So it could really make for, you know, a very exciting weekend if we do get rain in this qualifying session coming up in just under 1 hour's time. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And obviously, with only having one practice session so far this weekend, we don't really know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, at certain parts of the field, I think we already have a decent idea of who is going to be, you know, where. But for most of the grid, it is, you know, still hard to say who is going to be exactly where in qualifying. And, yeah, in this build up to qualifying, what we're going to be doing is going through the teams, you know, team by team, as I usually do, getting into how I think they will get on in this session, and then I'll get into some stats before we get into qualifying itself regarding some of the top teams and what to look out for statistically, certain teams and drivers. And of course, in 55 or just over 55 minutes from now, we will get into the session itself, and it should, looking at the forecast, I mean, maybe the rain will fall in the next, say, 30-40 minutes or so, but looking at the forecast, it's likely to start off dry and then start to rain, maybe midway through Q1 at the earliest, and then, you know, get heavier as the session goes on. So yeah, we'll see whether that does actually happen. Of course, here in Interlagos, when it does rain, it doesn't always the forecast, you know, come true. It will maybe forecast, you know, a bigger shower, or than actually happens, you know, hitting the circuit. We've seen many times in the past where teams and drivers have miscalculated the conditions because they're maybe expecting more rain, or maybe they're on the wrong tyres because they think the forecast is going to clear up anytime now, and then, you know, suddenly it changes in a way they didn't expect. So yeah, it is similar to Spa, I would say, this place, Sao Paulo, in terms of, again, the weather doesn't tend to to be predictable, or as predictable as, say, we get at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, for example. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting qualifying session for sure. And again, in this build-up, we will get into all of the teams and, how I think they'll get on, and the drivers as well. And probably in, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes time, I will get a poll going in the live chat asking you guys, who do you think is going to be on pole position today in qualifying? So don't worry, I'll get that poll going soon enough. First things first, let's get into, though, the results of practice 1. And it was pretty close throughout the entire field, really. So Sergio Perez ended up quickest by 4 thousandths of a second from Charles Leclerc second. Max Verstappen was third, only 8 thousandths of a second behind. So shows you how close things were. I don't think it'll be that close in qualifying in dry conditions, but yeah, I think it's it gives us something. I guess it gives us some excitement, I guess you could say, going into qualifying, that things are appearing to be pretty close. But one thing to remember, and I did watch practice 1, Red Bull did not do their fastest runs at the end of the session like Ferrari and Mercedes did. They did theirs halfway, did Red Bull, through the session. So, with that extra grip on the track, Red Bull probably could have gone a quarter of a second quicker. So it is important to remember that. And of course, with Max Verstappen, normally, of course, he's ahead of Sergio Perez. So yeah, I wouldn't read a massive amount into the lap times of Red Bull. And then you got Carlos Sainz in 4th place, Hamilton 5th, and Russell in 6th. Mercedes don't seem, on the face of it, to be, after practice 1, they don't seem to be too bad. But you have to remember, again, it's a shorter lap around here, so the gaps are always going to be closer than it actually really is. And again, because Mercedes did their best times at the end of the session, when Perez did his best time halfway through the session, that's why Mercedes were only a couple tenths of a second away from Perez in the Red Bull, when in reality, in dry conditions, I think it's more likely to be about half a second at best between Red Bull and Mercedes. In the wet, of course, we'll see what the difference is. I still think Red Bull in wet conditions, to be honest, are quicker than Mercedes are. But yeah, don't get too hyped with Mercedes, I guess, is what I am trying to say. And then the rest of the top 10, you've got Sebastian Vettel, Mick Schumacher, Valtteri Bottas, and Pierre Gasly. Good to see Sebastian Vettel looking so quick, and surprisingly quick, because I didn't think Aston Martin would be that quick over a single lap. Also great to see from Mick Schumacher up in the top 10. Valtteri Bottas continuing the great form from the last couple of races, and we know that he is very quick here. Was obviously on pole position for last year's Grand Prix here in Interlagos, and was on pole in 2017 as well. And then, yeah, Pierre Gasly in 10th. He, of course, has finished on the podium here. And last year, he finished 7th for AlphaTauri, which realistically was the best result he could have got from that race, because the AlphaTauri at the time wasn't really quicker during that weekend than the, Mercedes, Red Bull, or Ferrari cars. So, yeah, Gasly looking good as well. And AlphaTauri looking pretty decent with Gasly, at least. And then the rest of the field, it is, or it was, Alonso, Albon, Ocon, Stroll, Norris, Magnussen, Latifi, Zhou, Tsunoda, and Ricciardo. Now, I must add, very important to add this, that Alonso, Ocon, Norris, and Ricciardo did their best lap times on the medium compound tyre. So please do remember that. Don't think that McLaren are, horrendously slow. I mean, they're not massively quick or anything, but there are clear reasons as to why they weren't that quick in practice 1. And if they had done their best runs on the soft tyre, Ricciardo wouldn't have been in the top 10, I don't think. But Norris definitely would have, probably in 8th or 9th place. So, yeah, McLaren definitely have got a lot more pace in hand. And Alpine, pretty impressive for them, actually. Only being, a tenth or 2 tenths of a second away from, Bottas and Schumacher on a medium compound tyre that around this track should probably be 4-5 tenths of a second slower. So yeah, Alpine definitely have got the pace with both cars and both drivers to be in the top 10 in qualifying, and I expect both drivers to be in the top 10 in qualifying today. Other things to look at, Alex Albon looking pretty quick, which is good to see. If it does rain though, it will really hamper Williams' chances, because we know the Williams doesn't have a lot of downforce. Lance Stroll in 14th had a car issue towards the end of practice 1, so let's see whether he actually makes it out on track for qualifying. I hope he does, because Aston Martin seem to have so far some decent pace, and then after that it's pretty much as you know, as you can see, and there's no real other surprises or things to really note from the practice 1 order. But going into qualifying, I still think, you know, Red Bull are definitely the quickest team here in Sao Paulo. Maybe in the wet that could be different, but I think Red Bull are the quickest, and then Ferrari, you know, a second, with Mercedes third. Fourth quickest, I think, is most likely Alpine, and then after that, it's pretty close between probably McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Alfa Tauri, maybe Haas as well, who knows, over a single lap. At times, Haas this season have been very, very quick, so we'll see whether, you know, whether maybe they can produce that pace in qualifying in just under, or just over 47 minutes from now. But things are looking interesting, definitely, going into qualifying. But let's get into the teams and how I think they will get on in this session, starting with Red Bull. Just want to say quickly, obviously these pictures you're going to see are from last night's stream and are from the Mexico City Grand Prix. I wasn't able to get access to the pictures for, or from practice 1. So the pictures you'll be seeing on stream tonight are from Mexico. Apologies for that, but I haven't got the access to the pictures that I really, you know, like to have from a, you know, certain website. So yeah, that's why there won't be any from the weekend so far. But from tomorrow on, obviously, I'll have the pictures on stream for you guys, so don't worry about that. So yeah, you have to cope with that, unfortunately, for this evening. But yeah, for Red Bull, I think in dry conditions, they've definitely got a quicker car than everybody else. I think if they had done that final run, or if they had done their quickest run, rather, on the soft compound tyre, and it was at the, or they did do it on the soft compound tyre, I don't know what I'm talking about. If they had done it, you know, at the end of the session, not halfway through the session, when there's more rubber at the end of the session, more grip, yeah, I think Red Bull probably with both cars would have ended up about a quarter of a second clear of the two Ferraris, and probably, you know, near to half a second clear of Mercedes as well. So Red Bull are still the clear favourites to get pole position here. And even in the wet conditions, I you know, in the wet, I think Ferrari, at least in qualifying trim, do have a car that could be potentially the quickest around a track like this, because obviously Red Bull's top speed or high speed advantage is not as prevalent, or as you know, they can't use or utilize that as much in wet conditions. And Ferrari definitely at slower speed have, I would say, a better car than Red Bull do, at least in qualifying trim they do. So yeah, it's going to be a trickier session for Red Bull than it would be if it was dry. Hopefully, you know, from their perspective, they'll be hoping that it is dry for the session, because if it is, I think most likely they will end up with a 1-2 in qualifying. And if they were to get that, then there's a very good chance they could get a 1-2 in the sprint race and then a 1-2 in the Grand Prix on the Sunday. So yeah, if Ferrari or Mercedes want to somehow stop Red Bull this weekend, I think really this session is the absolute key, because like I said, if they get the front row here for the sprint race locked out, then it's going to be so hard for other for the other drivers and teams to be able to stop them, because of how quick their car is with heavier fuel on board and just how well this team is performing right now. So yeah, this is a very important session for really deciding the destiny of who wins this weekend. But yeah, Red Bull, they are the clear favourites. I wish I could sit here and say, well, you never know, Ferrari could be very competitive and right up, right up there. Mercedes could be right up there, like they were in Mexico. I wish I could say that, but yeah, just looking at the circuit layout, looking at what their pace was like in practice so far, I just don't think it's realistic to sit here and claim that Red Bull are going to have a massive fight on their hands to get pole position and be the victors from this weekend's race, which is a shame because obviously we want some surprise in F1, some unpredictability, but these things do happen. But yeah, for qualifying today, I think Max Verstappen will be on pole. Sergio Perez, I think if it is wet for Q3, I think probably ends up in 3rd place. And the reason I say that is because, he's not a bad wet weather driver. He is actually very good in the wet. Some of his best performances in his F1 career have been in wet conditions. But Charles Leclerc, I think, is a better wet weather driver than Perez is. So, yeah, I think Leclerc will, in a Ferrari car also, that is probably going to be better handling than the Red Bull in wet conditions if it is wet. I just think Leclerc will have, enough to get ahead of Perez. But because Max Verstappen is Max Verstappen and the Red Bull car is still going to be very competitive no matter the conditions, Max Verstappen, I think, gets on pole. But yeah, Perez, I'm going to go with him in 3rd because I believe it will rain. But if it's totally dry, then I'd honestly sit here and go for a 1-2. Verstappen ahead of Perez, of course. But let's hope it's a bit more competitive, close, and unpredictable than that. I mean, it has happened a few times this season where, we were expecting things to be a bit or things to be a bit more simple than it turned out. Qualifying in Hungary, for example, nobody thought Mercedes were going to get pole position there. And Red Bull ending up 10th and 11th on the grid. Nobody thought all of those things were going to happen, yet they happened. So you never know what's going to happen in Formula One. So let's hope today's one of those days where we get some unpredictability, and obviously the weather can cause that. For Ferrari, their pace was good in practice 1. It wasn't terrible or anything. They're definitely quicker than Mercedes over a single lap. There's no doubt about that. Not really a surprise. I thought they were going to be anyway. Maybe it's a bit closer between Ferrari and Mercedes than Ferrari would like so far. It doesn't bode well really for the sprint or the race on Sunday if Mercedes are, in qualifying trim, only maybe, a 10th or 2 behind. But in regards to qualifying, I think, pole position, unless Verstappen is really struggling for whatever reason, maybe with the conditions or just the car's handling in the conditions, I just don't see how Verstappen doesn't get pole. So realistically, I think the best we're going to see is, say, a 2nd and 3rd from Ferrari. My prediction is they'll end up 2nd and 4th, with Leclerc 2nd and Carlos Sainz in 4th place. And as I explained, the reason he'll get ahead of Perez is because, Charles Leclerc is such a good wet weather driver, as we've seen many times in his F1 career. And, Carlos Sainz is a very good wet weather driver as well. But we have seen many times this season with Carlos that he has disappointed in qualifying and just not produced anywhere near the pace of his teammate, which, I'm hoping he'll, show a lot more pace today than he's shown, a lot of times this season. But yeah, it's been a disappointing season, I think, from Sainz's point of view. And just to let you guys know, I did talk about this in my stream yesterday, that with Carlos Sainz, there was a possibility he'd be taking a grid penalty this weekend. It is now confirmed he is taking a 5-place grid penalty for a new ICE. Leclerc took a new ICE and turbo at the US Grand Prix, but we believe Carlos is just taking a 5-place penalty just for the new ICE. So yeah, Carlos Sainz, that penalty, by the way, will apply for the race on the Sunday, just like with Lewis Hamilton, for example, last year, where Hamilton obviously was disqualified from Friday qualifying, had to start at the back, and even though he came through, I think, to 5th in the end, he had to then drop 5 places on the grid for a new ICE, I think, for that race, back down to 10th, but obviously still ended up coming through and winning the race. So, yeah, that's what's going to happen with Carlos Sainz. He'll have to drop 5 places from wherever he finished in the sprint tomorrow evening. And hopefully for the Spaniard, he can finish probably, in the top 3 would be a nice result for him in the sprint tomorrow. So he was at least, on the 4th row of the grid, not too far away from the cars ahead. But, yeah, for Ferrari, they've got a quicker car here for sure, which is good to see. But, yeah, I just don't think they've got enough pace in hand to be able to beat Red Bull. To be honest, I would... I mean, I don't really care, as you guys know, who wins a Grand Prix. As long as we get an exciting Grand Prix, Nicholas Latifi could win every race for all I care. As long as we get exciting races, that's what matters to me. But with, this weekend, if we did get Ferrari on pole and then winning the sprint and then, holding on to the lead of the race on Sunday after the first lap, it would make things a lot more interesting, because if we get, a Red Bull pole or a Red Bull 1-2, and then they end up getting the same result in the sprint and then getting a great start to the race on the Sunday, it's going to be a pretty tough race to watch at that point. Again, I don't mind Red Bull winning, but it does get, a little boring, of course, when the same team does win so many races. And, of course, Red Bull have won 9 races in a row now. They're looking to make it 10 this weekend and then 11 in Abu Dhabi next weekend. But, yeah, to be honest, I wouldn't mind Ferrari having success today and in the sprint tomorrow, because, again, it would create a more exciting Grand Prix weekend. Let me know in the chat, guys. Do you think, it'll be a more exciting weekend if Ferrari end up on pole today and win the sprint? Or do you think it'll still end up being pretty inevitable in, the way Red Bull are, end up coming through and winning the race on the Sunday? Let me know in the live chat. I'll be curious to hear what you guys have to say. Probably in about 5 minutes' time, just to announce, I will set up the poll in the chat, getting into who do you guys think will be on pole position for the sprint race. So, yeah, I'll get into that in a few minutes' time. Let's just quickly go on to Mercedes-Benz. To be honest, there's not an absolute ton to say about Mercedes, because the pace they showed in practice 1, I mean, it was better than I expected by a couple tenths of a second, really. But I still don't think they can really, over a single lap, dry or wet, compete with Red Bull or Ferrari. So, yeah, I think Mercedes are likely to end up in 5th and 6th place. And, if they can grab any higher position due to an amazing drive by one of the, drivers in the wet or changeable conditions, that would be great. Or if anyone makes a mistake and they can capitalize on that, that would be great. But realistically, I think 5th and 6th is where they're going to be. Maybe then in the sprint, which is, was it 24 laps or 25 laps? Maybe then with their better race pace or better pace with higher fuel on board, they'll be able to maybe make up a position in the sprint to give themselves a decent chance at podium on the Sunday. But, yeah, as for qualifying today, if you're a Mercedes fan, don't get too overhyped with, what you saw in practice 1. Again, the pace comparison or pace difference between Mercedes and Red Bull looked pretty close and looked to be pretty good for Mercedes. But again, I think there are some factors as to why it was so close, and I don't think it will be quite that close in in qualifying in 35 minutes time. But even if they, again, qualify 5th and 6th for the sprint, if they can gain at least a position with one of their cars, or not with one of their cars, if they can gain a position with whoever's qualifying in 5th place, for the sprint, and then that sets them up for a decent result on the Sunday. And obviously Carlos Sainz is taking his 5-place penalty, so that's going to help Mercedes massively as well. Then, you know, they could really put themselves in a position to get a podium this weekend, which would be, considering the track layout, that would be a very good result for them. It really, really would. And remember, they're only 40 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. So, you know, it is still possible they can grab second, which I'm sure would be a... I think they'd be not massively bothered by it, you know, finishing second in the championship, but I think it would also be a bit of a proud thing for them, just to show that, you know, no matter how bad they were at the start of the season, they were still able to end up, you know, recovering from that and, you know, grabbing still a pretty good result in the championship despite the car they had. So, you know, they are still going to push for that, no doubt about it. But then again, if they finish in third, they have even more wind tunnel testing time than they have had this year. You got to remember, this year Mercedes have had the least amount because last year they finished first in the championship. So yeah, next year hopefully we'll see a bounce back from Mercedes. But what I'm going to do now, guys, is, like I said, I'm going to put a poll in the chat to ask you guys, who do you think is going to be on pole position for the sprint tomorrow? Before I do so, just want to say, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. I will be live tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. UK time for the sprint race watch-along. Firstly, from 5:30 till 7 p.m. will be the sprint race preview. Then from 7 till 8 p.m. UK time will be the sprint race watch-along. The sprint race starts at 7:30 p.m. UK time. And then for at least half an hour after the session finishes, I will be reacting with you guys to the events of the sprint. And then on the Sunday, I'll be live at 4 p.m. UK time for the race watch-along for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. And that'll be going, you know, or the schedule for that day will be, you know, from 4 till 5:30 be the race preview. 5:30 p.m. UK time till 8 p.m. will be the race watch-along. The race starts at 6 p.m. UK time. And then for an hour after the session finishes, I will be... you know, reacting with you guys to the events of that Grand Prix this Sunday. So yeah, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash the like button to obviously help the channel grow. Would be great if you could do so. But let's get that poll created in the chat, and then I will come to your comments, guys, probably by the time I've finished all the teams, because I've still got obviously most of the teams to get through. Let me just do this poll quick, and then you guys can vote on it for the next, say, 30 minutes, and then obviously I'll end the poll right before we get into qualifying. So, we just ask, who do you think will get pole for the sprint in Brazil? And I'll just quickly do the options. The options I'm going to go for are Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez, Hamilton, like it was last night when I did a poll asking you guys who you thought was going to win the race this weekend. So I'll just quickly do that. There you go. So let me just get that poll going. And there you go. It's at the top of the live chat right now. So make sure to vote on that poll, guys. Who do you think will get pole for the sprint in Brazil? Will it be Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, or Perez? Let me know in the chat in the next 30 minutes or so, and then I will make sure to read out the results of that poll before we get into the session itself in just over 30 minutes' time. One thing I will do quickly is just check Twitter to see if there's any news I can bring you guys. And let me just have a quick look. And no, can't see anything at the moment in regards to any news. There has been other news though, which is you guys may have heard this. Mercedes, on their car, they had a sponsorship with FTX, which is was a crypto partner of theirs, they have just filed for bankruptcy, and Mercedes have suspended their deal with them, which is, a shame. And I think FTX, when they signed that deal, which I think was it back in May of this year, I think they were worth, I think I saw someone tweet that they were worth $32 billion, and now they're filing for bankruptcy. So yeah, not great there. Obviously, if anyone is interested in that whole crypto scene, I think people will already know, what's happened with the whole cryptocurrency stuff this year. Investing in the whole crypto stuff this year has been the worst thing possible because of, everything crashing, basically, it seems. So, yeah, a shame for Mercedes. I mean, they're not going to, miss out on too much, because I don't think that sponsorship was key for them in keeping them, financially at a level where they could compete. But, it is still a shame. And obviously, there are human beings involved when it comes to, the declaration of bankruptcy. So it is a bit of a sad situation. But yeah, just want to let you guys know about that. And no, can't see anything else. Actually, a Spanish journalist, I think Victor Abad, I think his name is, reported about 45 minutes ago that it started to rain in Interlagos. So yeah, I will make sure in a moment to turn my TV on so I can see from Sky F1's coverage exactly what is going on at the track. But don't forget, guys, whilst I go through the midfield teams now for the final, say, 25 minutes before we get into the session itself, make sure to keep voting in that poll at the top of the chat if you have not already. Who do you think will be on pole for the sprint in Brazil? Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton or Perez? Let me know in the live chat. I'll just quickly get my TV and everything on. I can see what's going on. Practice 1 was held in overcast, dry conditions, which is, if it is going to be dry this weekend, that is what the conditions are going to be at best. We're not going to see, the weather we saw last year on the race day, for example, where it was very hot and sunny. It was a beautiful day in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. So yeah, that's not going to be happening this weekend. But let's now get into the rest of the teams. Also, another thing I want to mention is obviously when I build up to qualifying, I do tend to look at, sector time data and stuff like that. I wasn't able to grab any from practice 1 before this stream started. So sorry about that, but yeah, I just wasn't able to get that information to be able to look at who was quick in what sector. I do know that Mercedes, after the first 2 sectors, they were pretty much on pace with Red Bull, but then Red Bull were so much quicker in that final sector, which is not surprised because the final sector is pretty much all about straight line speed. And we know Red Bull are, a lot better at Mercedes when it comes to that aspect of a Formula 1 car. So, yeah, unfortunately, I can't give you that information, but obviously, after we see qualifying today, I'll be able to delve into the data and see truly what went on in this session. Anyway, let's go on to McLaren. Obviously, they're engaged in a very important battle in the Constructors' Championship with Alpine, and they are, 7 points behind Alpine in the championship. But yeah, it's not looking great after practice 1. And to be honest, I mean, Norris was even saying coming into the weekend, and thankfully, by the way, Lando Norris is okay. Had some food poisoning yesterday, and thankfully he was able to be physically well enough to drive the car this morning, and he will be for the rest of the weekend. But yeah, Norris said coming into the weekend that this track's probably not going to suit their car that much, and I even said last night that I'd be surprised if McLaren, to be honest, were on the pace of Alpine, who definitely have quite a bit of a quicker car around a track like this, a high-speed circuit, really. High-speed reliant track like this, rather than what McLaren have, which is a car that is a lot more reliant on slower corners and slower speed racetracks. That's really where McLaren are at their best. That's why in Mexico they were definitely a lot more competitive than they've been so far this weekend. But as long as Lando Norris is feeling okay, I think Norris will make it into the top 10. I don't know where. To be honest, though, if it is wet properly in Q2, Q3 especially, then that will actually help McLaren quite a bit. I mean, they will still be struggling in the final sector and a tad in the first sector with that lack of straight line speed, but it will be a lot more limited, what they're losing to Alpine in that aspect in wet conditions. So it is good for McLaren that it is going to rain, and that could put Lando Norris ahead of, the two Alpines. We've seen Norris is always, very quick in wet conditions. And again, the McLaren car better in the wet. We've seen that a few times this season. Obviously, Singapore, Lando Norris finishing in 4th place. Just looking at the coverage now, it's raining, but it doesn't seem to be very heavy. It seems to be light. In fact, I think it may have actually stopped the rain, but the track is definitely wet or greasy at the very best, I would say. But what was I going to say? Yeah, McLaren have had a very good car this season in wet conditions. Again, Norris finishing 4th in Singapore. He was, 3rd in qualifying at Imola, was it? Was it 3rd? Yeah, it was 3rd in Friday qualifying at Imola, where the sprint was, at that particular Grand Prix that weekend as well. And even the British Grand Prix, Lando Norris ended up qualifying in 5th place. 5th place. So, yeah, definitely look out for Norris and McLaren. But if it is dry when we get to, Q2, Q3, it will be a struggle for McLaren in qualifying today. But if it does rain, they should be able to be at a much better pace than what, they would normally be at a track like this in dry conditions. So if you're a McLaren fan, really, you've got to pin your hopes on Lando Norris. When it comes to Daniel Ricciardo, Ricciardo's never really had great races around here. He's never been on the podium here in Brazil. His best finish was 4th in 2018, where he was very good in that race and very good that weekend. But, which is not very lucky because he had a 5-place penalty, I remember. And then Red Bull in the race was so quick. But because he had that penalty that put him, further down on the grid, he couldn't really capitalise as much on that as, as Max Verstappen did that day in finishing in 2nd. And, the Grand Prix last year, he didn't finish in the points. The Grand Prix in 2019, I remember he had a very clumsy race, hit Kevin Magnussen. I remember he got a penalty. I think he still finished in the top 6 maybe, but yeah, he's never really had great pace around here as Daniel Ricciardo. So, yeah, if you're a McLaren fan, pin your hopes on Lando Norris because I think he's the man for McLaren today, especially if it is wet. But of course, Alpine do have their own very good drivers in wet conditions, and obviously Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon are those two drivers. Fernando Alonso has looked pretty quick so far this weekend after the first practice session, and Alpine look absolutely fine. Alonso, I am expecting to be ahead of Ocon. Ocon has been pretty quick here in the past. He was finishing in the points here in 2017. I think he finish in the not in 2018, obviously, because he hit Verstappen after that whole or in that whole incident during that race when he was trying to unlap himself. And then, last year he did beat Alonso and finished in 8th place, I believe. So, Esteban's had some pretty good pace here in the past as well. So, Alpine should be fine. And they should be the quickest midfield team in the dry. But if it's not dry, then, in the wet it's going to be a bit trickier. But really, the only driver or drivers I think they need to worry about in wet conditions is probably Lando Norris and Sebastian Vettel, maybe a Valtteri Bottas or a Lance Stroll, but we'll see, how they get on. But yeah, even in the wet, I think Alonso and Ocon get into Q3. We have to remember they're both very good in wet conditions, as they've displayed multiple times. Ocon finished 4th in Japan a month ago, and Fernando Alonso, well, need we say any more about Fernando? But yeah, Alpine will be fine. They'll probably have, as a team, the best qualifying result out of all the midfield teams, and I think they'll look pretty good going into the sprint. Whether they actually go and get the points necessary from the sprint and the race on the Sunday, we'll have to see. But yeah, the pace of their car should be absolutely fine. And now I'm going to try quickly for the final, or in the next, say, 10 minutes, I'm going to try and whiz through the rest of the teams, because I do want to post the link of this stream back out on my community tab and on Twitter, just so we can get some more people here for obviously the start of the session like we normally do. But yeah, for Alfa Romeo, they've got a decent car this weekend by the looks of it. Valtteri Bottas looking pretty quick in practice 1, P9, and was consistently very quick in practice 1 as well, was occasionally up in 3rd place here or there. But it's still difficult to see, it's difficult to see with Bottas still him getting into Q3. And the reason I say that is because still with Alfa Romeo, they've got a decent car, but they're not quick enough to the point where they are, easily able to be getting into Q3, whether it is dry or wet. So it's going to be very close. I think Valtteri Bottas could very well end up in like 9th or 10th place in qualifying today, but like I said, it's going to be very close, and obviously in the wet weather, it's going to change around the pace of the cars. Just trying to think what Alfa Romeo's performance has been like this season in the wet, and from what I can remember, it's been pretty good. Silverstone and Canada, Zhou Guanyu ended up in the top 10 in qualifying in both of those wet sessions, and Bottas ended up in the top 10 at Imola, I think in 6th or 7th place, or 8th place, Bottas. So Alfa Romeo do tend to have a decent car for the conditions, and we know aerodynamically speaking, they've got a pretty tidy car. The reason they've dropped back so much compared to the start of the season is obviously because of the lack of development, and obviously the change in rules when it came to the weight of the cars. The minimum weight did not help either. But yeah, they will be definitely close to a Q3 appearance. Whether they get it or not, again, it's very hard to say. It's too close to call, I guess you could say, between Alfa Romeo and a lot of the other teams. For Haas F1, even though Mick Schumacher was quick in practice 1, I think in the wet conditions, I don't think Haas have the car really to compete for Q3. Maybe they could sneak a car into Q2. But yeah, I don't think Haas are going to be massively competitive in this qualifying session coming up. My only hope is that Mick Schumacher can out-qualify Kevin Magnussen, not because I don't like Kevin Magnussen, I like him quite a lot, but I obviously want Mick to stay on the grid, because I do think he deserves another chance. So yeah, it would be nice if Mick could get that little mini battle won in this session today. Obviously, it's going to be announced very soon as to who is going to be in the second Haas seat for 2023, either Mick Schumacher or Nico Hülkenberg. So yeah, we'll see on that. We should get an announcement, by the way, probably in the next 7 days. The sooner the better, obviously, but yeah, it should be in the next week. I don't think it'll be on qualifying or race day in Abu Dhabi. I think it'll be at the latest, probably Friday practice day next weekend in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, I'm hoping Mick has a good session and hoping that he can deliver something that his team can, take note of in that little battle for who's going to end up, keeping the seat or getting in the seat, for 2023 alongside Kevin Magnussen. For AlphaTauri, pace with Pierre Gasly looking pretty good. He ended up in P10 in practice 1. Now, normally, AlphaTauri don't tend to be very quick in... well, let me rephrase that, because I'm just thinking back. I think Singapore, they ended up getting both cars into Q3 in the wet conditions there, so let me just rephrase that. With the way this car is, characteristically, you wouldn't think it's a car that really handles that well in the wet, but it actually does. Because like I said, Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda ended up in the top 10 in Q3 in Singapore. And to be honest, I think the main problem with the AlphaTauri car this season, which I know Pierre Gasly was bitching about quite a bit earlier this season, was the high-speed performance in the high-speed corners. Obviously, in the wet, your performance in high-speed corners, if you don't have as good a performance in high-speed corners, doesn't really show as much because the corners become naturally, slower than it would be in the dry. But I think AlphaTauri, coming into the session, I think it's really, with them, they're in the same boat as Alfa Romeo. They've got a car definitely good enough to get into Q3, but it really depends on the drivers, whether Gasly can deliver the lap to get into Q3, and whether, maybe Yuki Tsunoda can get into Q3. That'd be very nice to see. Tsunoda's been very good in the last few races, I have to say. But for Gasly, obviously has a good record around here. In qualifying even, he qualified 7th here in 2019, and ended up obviously finishing in 2nd. And then last year, he started the sprint race in 4th, ended up dropping back to 8th, but then started the race from 7th and finished in 7th place. So Gasly does have some pretty good speed around this track, and maybe after a year's experience, Tsunoda will have some better pace as well. But yeah, they're a dark horse, I guess you could say, AlphaTauri, for possibly getting into the final part of qualifying in Q3. And we'll see how they get on. Aston Martin, they will be very happy that it's raining, because obviously their main strength is downforce at the moment. It wasn't at the start of the season, of course, but now it is. And, they were always, I think, in dry conditions, they were going to struggle with the lack of straight line speed that they so clearly have. So, yeah, it's good for Aston Martin that it can be at least damp out on the track. It'll help bring out the best of their car, I think. Well, at least it really should. As still looking, by the way, at the Sky F1 broadcast, it doesn't appear to be raining at all. No, it isn't. So that rain has stopped for now. Whether we'll get more rain or not, we'll have to see. Again, it is difficult to say with Interlagos, what the weather's going to do, because it doesn't always hit the track, rain in the way that you would normally expect it to. It can be heavier than expected, lighter than expected. Rain can just magically appear sometimes. It's again similar to Spa in the way the rain affects races here in Brazil. But Sebastian Vettel looking good. Obviously, his penultimate race in F1. And obviously, this place, Interlagos, is a brilliant place for Sebastian Vettel. He won the World Championship here in 2012. He's won here in 2010, 2013, and 2017. So that's, 3 wins. Would have won the race in 2011, but had a gearbox issue, which is why he ended up dropping down to 2nd place. But yeah, he's looking very, very good. And Sebastian has always been pretty competitive at Interlagos, even in his Toro Rosso days, where he finished 4th, obviously, that weekend in that classic Grand Prix. Yeah, for Lance Stroll, I've not actually seen if he's got, any particular issue or what the issue is with his car, but he had an issue at the very end of practice 1. And yeah, he was saying, oh, guys, this is not good. This is really, really not good. We've got, a problem here. So, yeah, we'll see whether Stroll can get out on the track. I hope he can, because we know how good he is in the changeable or wet conditions. And finally, we will go on to Williams. And yeah, in the dry, I think Williams have got a car that maybe, with Alex Albon, definitely not Nicholas Latifi, could get into Q3, honestly. The track layout is very good for them in dry conditions because they have a monstrous car in a straight line. We've seen that, many times this season. It's a big reason why Albon has been able to score the certain points that he has. But what do you call it? Yeah, they've got a good car in the dry, but I just think in the wet it might just be a bit too difficult for them to really get near Q3. I think they could probably get Alex Albon into Q2 in 14th, 15th place, but yeah, any higher than that in the wet, and I would be very impressed by that result if they were to get higher than, say, 14th on the grid with Alex Albon. But at least Williams are looking competitive, and to be honest, even though I know Latifi is, Latifi, and he's slow as shit, it is nice that this weekend, and really since the midway point in the season, as I'm just looking at the weather radar, there is rain on the way by the looks of it, but yeah, it's kind of scattered, the showers. We don't know exactly, how it's going to affect the track. But what I was going to say quickly was, yeah, it's good to see with Williams that they've improved to a midfield team. I mean, they're still a lower midfield team, but it is nice to see that we have 10 teams on the grid that are all, competitive, and we don't have one team just hanging on at the back of the field racing just themselves. So that's good to see. Yeah, Williams, we'll see how they do. Alex Albon, yeah, I think probably gets into Q2, but I don't think he'll get any higher than that. But in the dry, he's also a dark horse for sure to get into Q3. So we'll see what he does and see how Williams do in qualifying today. But let me just get these pictures on the screen. These are the pictures you'll be seeing during the watch along itself. And we've got 7.5 minutes to go until qualifying begins. So again, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because I'll be live tomorrow for the sprint race watch along. We'll be getting going 2 hours before the sprint at 5:30 p.m. UK time. And then firstly till 7 p.m. we'll be doing a sprint race preview. Then from 7 till 8 p.m. UK time will be the sprint race watch along. The sprint race starts at 7:30 p.m. UK time tomorrow. And then for at least half an hour after the session finishes, I'll be reacting with you guys to the sprint. So make sure, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe and come along for that. And for everyone watching right now, if you haven't already, don't forget to smash that like button, obviously to help the channel grow. What I'm going to do quickly is just post a link out a couple times on my community tab and on Twitter, and then we'll get into the final little bits of this preview. And obviously I will get into the results of that poll. Make sure if you have not voted, make sure to vote in the poll at the top of the chat, because I will end the poll probably in the next 2 or 3 minutes or so. Come join us in watching along qualifying for the Sao Paulo GP. And yeah, I'll just quickly give this a post out on Twitter, and then I'll come to some comments from you guys in the chat as well, because I know I've not read out any comments so far. Let me just quickly do this tweet. Come join us to watch along qualifying for the Sao Paulo GP. And yeah, I'll just do a few hashtags, and then we'll get into your comments, the poll, and the final bits of build up before we get into the session for proper. We'll just do these final 2 or 3 hashtags, and let's try and do the final one. And is that good enough? Yeah. So there you go, and hopefully we get some more people joining in a few moments time. But let me just quickly read out some comments in the chat to see what you guys are saying. Good to see you all, by the way. All the regulars and just everyone in general. Matthew Pike says Perez all day long, bitches. It would be nice to see Perez on pole and maybe win this weekend, because it would be, you know, a difference. Even though it would still be Red Bull, it'd still be a difference to what we've seen this week, or in the last few races, really. Even though he won in Singapore, what was it, 5 weeks ago? I think it was. G Walker says this is kind of cool. Quali on Friday. Hey, it's different. Good evening, guys, says Bravo Moz. Good morning from me. Yeah, good to see you, mate. Hopefully you're doing well. And he says it's 5:45 a.m. Saturday morning. I'm already at work. Fuck my life. Yeah. Glad you could join us though for the session. Good to see you, mate. Lavgura says evening, everyone. Qualifying. Oh, it's a bloody sprint race weekend. And Simon says Latifi will race at Le Mans next year. He may even complete one lap in 24 hours. I could not resist dissing Go Tifi. I don't know what that comment means. At the bottom of the live chat from Jackson says Ferrari is not considered both drivers' leg concentration. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. Bravamos says Merc can only beat Ferrari if Ferrari behave like Ferrari, which is very possible indeed. Right, quickly, I am going to just end this poll and read out the final results. So, and I'll just quickly read out a comment from Will F1 who says Mercedes and Hamilton were bigged up so much in Singapore it was annoying. They were, but I think it was rightfully so. And he says, and the drivers drove shit. They did. It was rightfully so, because the pace was there. It's just the drivers didn't deliver, and we didn't expect that to happen. Anyway, let me read off the results of this poll. So, what I asked you guys was, who do you think will get pole for the sprint in Brazil? And you guys think it will be Max Verstappen. He got 45% of the vote. Hamilton second with 29%. Leclerc third with 19%. And Perez fourth with 5% of the vote. Thank you guys for voting. And yeah, I would agree that I think it'll be Max Verstappen getting a pole for the sprint. As you can hear, my throat is in not great condition, so do bear with me for the next couple of minutes or so. I will have a drink in a few moments' time. One thing I want to do, though, quickly, is get onto some final stats before qualifying, as qualifying begins in 2 minutes' time. And by the way, it is not raining at the moment, but the track, I think, might be a bit damp. Anyway, let's go on to some stats regarding Red Bull. Max Verstappen, his last pole position in Brazil was from 2019. A great pole position that day for Red Bull and a great weekend by him. Verstappen has finished first in qualifying 7 times in 2022. The reason I put it like that is because obviously at Spa, he finished first by a mile, but he didn't start on pole, which is why I put it there. And it is surprising that it's only been 7 times in 2022 he's finished first in qualifying out of, 20 races so far, with these, this weekend, next weekend, the final 2 races. And Red Bull have only taken 35% of poles in 2022, despite winning so many races in 2022. So, yeah. In qualifying, Red Bull definitely beatable. For Ferrari and Charles Leclerc, Leclerc's best qualifying result in Brazil is 4th from 2019. He did, though, take a 10th-place grid penalty for that Grand Prix, and later in the race obviously ended up colliding with his teammate Sebastian Vettel. Ferrari's last pole position in Brazil was in 2008 with Felipe Massa. That's how long it's been since they were on pole position here in Brazil. And Ferrari, they have been very successful in qualifying this year. They have taken 60% of poles in 2022. And finally, for Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton has taken pole in Brazil 3 times since 2012. Obviously, in 2012, that was his last race weekend for McLaren, where he got pole and, well, he could have won the race, but Hülkenberg obviously took him out. Mercedes, though, they have taken pole in Brazil every year since 2014, except for 2019. So they've got a very good record here. They just haven't got the car, though, I don't think, to really have great success this weekend. And quickly, before we get into the session, here are the championship standings. Max Verstappen, obviously the champion. Perez in second, only 5 points clear of Leclerc. Russell in fourth. Hamilton now fifth, and only 4 points clear of Carlos Sainz. And then Norris, Ocon, Alonso, Bottas completing the order. And then on the constructor side, Red Bull, obviously the champions on the constructor side. Ferrari in second. Mercedes third. Mercedes only 40 points behind Ferrari. Alpine in fourth, 7 points clear of McLaren in fifth. Alfa Romeo is sixth, 4 points clear of Aston Martin in seventh. Haas at eighth, 1 point clear of AlphaTauri in ninth. And Williams are dead last. Anyway, we need to get on to this session because qualifying has now begun. And I will sync up the timer at the, what do you call it? And there's obviously the running order. And I'll just get rid of that bottom ticker there. There you go. And just adjust the picture there. There you go. Obviously, I'll get the dotted line out ready to illustrate where the cutoff zone is in a moment. Yeah, the session has begun. And in about 30 seconds time, I will get the timer on the screen at the 17-minute mark. It will be as we're now looking at Charles Leclerc coming out to the track, and it looks as though everyone is on intermediate tyres, which looks to be the appropriate tyre for this track. And let me get the timer on screen right now. There you go. So 17. I'll just adjust it quickly. There you go. 17 minutes to go in Q1. And I will also get that dotted line out to illustrate where the cutoff zone is. And yeah, if you are new to F1, obviously the bottom 5 in Q1, at the end of Q1, if it remains as it is on the screen at the moment, which is Stroll, Magnussen, Schumacher, Latifi, Russell, then that is the drivers that would be knocked out, obviously, in Q1. Obviously, Russell in a Mercedes, so we're not expecting that to happen. You never know in Formula 1, and with it being wet, it definitely throws a curveball at the teams and drivers. As Schumacher, Gasly, Magnussen, and Tsunoda and Stroll now have started a lap. Lance Stroll, good to see that he doesn't have an issue with his car. As here comes Charles Leclerc down the pit straight and into turn 1. No DRS activated, of course. And let's see how the Ferrari is handling in the wet. Looks to be pretty good through turn 1, 2, and 3. And his first sector time should be a 20.2 for Leclerc. Max Verstappen and the two Mercedes as well are still in the pits, so they better hope Verstappen, Hamilton and Russell that they don't get caught out by the weather, because that really could affect things. But Charles Leclerc is a big tank slapper there through turn 9, I think that was. Yeah, it was. Big tank slapper, a lot of oversteer, which is surprising because normally the Ferrari car at slow speed is pretty good. But looks good through turn 11, now into Junsao, which is the final real corner of turn 12. And he gets a decent exit. And he should, Charles Leclerc, go quickest with this lap. I just want to update that Lance Stroll is now quickest. Obviously, Charles Leclerc now goes quickest on a 119.1. Let me just update that quickly. So Charles Leclerc up to first position with Stroll in second. And then Kevin Magnussen is in third place. And then you've got Valtteri Bottas in fourth in the Alfa Romeo with Gasly fifth. And Tsunoda in sixth place. As Lando Norris goes up to second, about 0.4 of a second slower. But Leclerc, Perez only goes fourth, and Stroll actually goes... Stroll is actually down to third. I thought he was up to third there. Apologies. But yeah, Lando Norris is now up to P2. And Sergio Perez is up to 4th place. And I think they were just showing a replay there on the broadcast of Leclerc's tank slapper. As Gasly is now 2nd with Tsunoda in 3rd. As Russell goes 0.3 of a second quicker than Leclerc in the first sector. Leclerc, though, goes even quicker on another lap, now on a 118.7 out front. Valtteri Bottas goes up to 3rd. So it's Leclerc, Gasly, Bottas, Tsunoda, Norris, Zhou Guanyu now up to 6th place. And then you've got Stroll in 7th. Ricciardo is now in 8th, with Perez 9th, Magnussen in 10th, and then Schumacher is in 11th place. Well, he was. Now it's Sebastian Vettel up to 11th place, is it? Or no, he's actually down to 12th, and the reason is because Carlos Sainz is now up to 2nd, as Russell had a good first sector, but did not really improve his lap much after that, and only went 6th. Lewis Hamilton did a purple final sector, interestingly, probably because of a slipstream from a car ahead, and only has gone P12 with that lap. So Russell is up to 6th, as Max Verstappen so far on his flying lap is about 1/10 of a second slower than Leclerc. So Leclerc has the advantage for the moment, but what will it be up to the line? It will be Max Verstappen having way more pace in the final sector and is now 0.2 of a second quicker than Leclerc. So Max Verstappen now at the top of the timesheets. And yeah, that straight line speed of the Red Bull really helping there in that final sector, because Leclerc was actually quicker after the first 2 sectors, as Lando Norris is actually 1/10 of a second up on Verstappen after the first 2 sectors. So this is a good lap for the Brit, who seems to be ill quite a lot this season. He's had tonsillitis a few times, I think. As Lando Norris, yep, goes up to 3rd place. Good lap there from Lando. And we have got Esteban Ocon up in 5th place. Good first effort there for the French driver. And Sergio Perez improves, now up to 2nd place. Fernando Alonso now goes P1, quickest. Great to see. Obviously, he's been great in wet conditions in the history of F1. And obviously Canada earlier this season. He was 2nd on the grid, wasn't he? In the wet. So, yeah. Great to see Fernando up in P1. As Tsunoda, just a replay of him struggling at turn 4. And a replay of Verstappen probably losing the rear end on the exit of the Jinsao. Yeah, just a slight bit, but there was no real big issue there. But, yeah, Fernando Alonso is now quickest, and then it is Sergio Perez up in 3rd for Red Bull, and then you've got Leclerc 4th, Norris 5th, Zhou Guanyu has gone up to 6th place. Good effort from the Chinese driver. And then you've got Carlos Sainz in 7th, Ocon 8th, Lance Stroll is 9th, with Sebastian Vettel in P10. And then you've got Bottas 11th. Lewis Hamilton is, only 12th currently. Well, no, he's now 13th, because George Russell has now gone all the way up to 4th place, and he's only 1/10.5 up, as Kevin Magnussen has just done a purple middle sector on the intermediates, as I should remember who just went onto soft compound tyres there, as Kevin Magnussen goes 3rd for Haas, but somebody, I think Yuki Tsunoda, has come out on a set of soft tyres, so they are going for the gamble. And if there is rain coming, like, you know, in the next minute or two, it is a gamble. But it could really pay off. Yeah, it's actually Pierre Gasly on the soft. But yes, now Max Verstappen is back to the top of the timesheets. He's 0.2 of a second quicker than Fernando Alonso. So it's now Verstappen, Alonso, Perez, Russell, Leclerc, Norris, Zhou, Sainz, Ocon, Stroll. And then you've got Vettel 11th, Bottas 12th, Hamilton 13th, Gasly 14th, Ricciardo 15th. And then in the drop zone, guys, with 8 minutes to go in Q1, as Hamilton does a purple middle sector, Kevin Magnussen has had his time deleted, as Mick Schumacher goes all the way up to 3rd. Let me just see where Lewis Hamilton goes quickly. Lewis Hamilton to the line. Goes first. Very good final sector. 10.5 quicker than Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton goes quickest. Good to see there from Hamilton, who of course we know is so good in wet conditions. So Hamilton quickest, Verstappen second, Alonso 3rd, and then Schumacher in 4th. What a top 4 that is. Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso, Schumacher. In terms of names, of course. And then you've got Perez in 5th. Esteban Ocon has improved up to 6th place. And then you've got Russell, Leclerc, Norris, and Zhou completing the top 10. Sainz is 11th with Stroll 12th. Vettel 13th. Bottas 14th. Gasly 15th. And in the drop zone with 7 minutes to go now, guys, it is Ricciardo, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Albon, and Latifi. Let me know in the chat, who do you think gets knocked out in Q1? As Pierre Gasly on his soft tyre, yeah, definitely lacking grip. Quite a bit of grip. His car's all over the place in these conditions, and he did not improve his first sector. He may, though, still be able to go quicker than he did before. No, he's he's a bit off. He's not too far away, to be honest, from those tyres firing up. What he's got to do, though, Pierre, he's got to keep the temperature in those tyres. If he does, eventually those soft tyres, if it doesn't rain again, those soft tyres will start to work. As he did a 1:20.7 that occasion. He's now in the drop zone. That lap, though, was only, what, 1.7 seconds slower than his personal best. So, like I said, it's not too far away from what he needs. Just needs to keep out there, get the temperature on the tyres, and he should be okay. As replay Kevin Magnussen running wide on the entry curb to turn 7, or turn 8, sorry. Hamilton did that in practice 1 and locked up massively. Magnussen, thankfully, got away with it. Good skill there. And massive sparks there from the Haas, obviously running quite low to the ground. And proper sparks that. Reminiscent of the 1980s, of course. As Pierre Gasly has done a purple first sector, so yeah, I think that's pretty much the sign that people now need to be on the soft tyres. And yes, he's now 1.8 seconds quicker than Valtteri Bottas with 5 minutes to go. So Pierre Gasly is about to go quickest for AlphaTauri. Let's see what the lap time is. The current fastest lap with Lewis Hamilton's a 1:18.0. Gasly only ends up 0.4 of a second quicker, but it's a 1:17.6. Yeah, those tyres all the time, and Gasly going for another flying lap. Those tyres, as the laps go on, will more and more become the tyre of choice. Ferrari have got Charles Leclerc in the pits, currently in P10. In his his pit box with no tyres on. And they're now starting to apply soft compound tyres. But I've got to be honest, they don't look very sure of what they're doing. They've got the 2 rear tyres on, but for some reason they've not got one of the front tyres on. As Gasly had a big moment on the exit of the final corner. That's why he didn't improve his That's why he didn't improve his final sector and why he didn't go as quick as he really should have for that whole lap. But I'm sure he'll go even quicker in a moment. Sebastian Vettel now on the soft tyres. Vettel, though, hasn't improved on this lap, so he's taking time to warm those tyres up. And Pierre Gasly goes in about a second quicker than he did before onto a 1:16.5. So yeah, Gasly looking good. Lando Norris also on the soft tyres. Most people now are on the soft compound tyres. There's a Red Bull there with 3 minutes to go to pull off line to let Norris through. As Alex Albon goes all the way up to second. Nicholas Latifi is now up to P11 as Lando Norris now goes up to second. I'll keep you updated, by the way, as to what's happening with Ferrari. Charles Leclerc is on an out lap, so I assume he's on the soft compound tyre. George Russell is now up to second in the Mercedes. And yeah, we've got Nicholas Latifi in 13th place. Let's update that. There you go. Daniel Ricciardo goes from 19th up to 5th. As the track ramps up in grip, I'm not sure if that's going to be good enough for him to get through. Fernando Alonso now goes quickest on a 1:16.1. So Alonso back to the top of timesheets. Sebastian Vettel now goes third for Aston Martin. So Sebastian Vettel up to third position for Aston Martin. Nicholas Latifi, the GOAT! He is the GOAT. He's gone quickest. By 0.2 of a second, Latifi is quickest. We know in wet conditions he's very good. Obviously finished in, was it 9th or 8th place in Japan in the wet race there. And then as Norris now goes quickest from Verstappen now in second. And then obviously at Silverstone, he qualified in 10th place as Leclerc here being held up a bit by the AlphaTauri ahead. Yes, now Norris first with Russell second. As Leclerc has had to back off. And he's bulked a bit Carlos Sainz on this final lap. Or one of the final laps they'll have. What are Ferrari going to do? They can't tell Leclerc to let Sainz through, or else they'll cost Leclerc what he needs to get into Q2. As now Esteban Ocon goes up to third. Obviously the timings or the positions are going to change around massively, so do bear with me, guys. In the next couple of minutes, Pierre Gasly goes back up to second place. It's Norris, Gasly, Russell, Ocon. Carlos Sainz now is up to 5th position. Alex Albon goes quickest for Williams by 0.5 of a second. Albon quickest. You've got Sainz in 6th. Max Verstappen is in P7 currently. George Russell improves up to 3rd. And you've got Kevin Magnussen now all the way up in 8th position as the checkered flag now falls, and Sergio Perez did make the line in time. That's critical for him because that means he can do one more lap. Ricciardo has gone 5th with his final attempt as Zhou Guanyu has gone up to P7 as Fernando Alonso goes quickest for Alpine. Charles Leclerc goes up to 5th. Carlos Sainz goes up to 6th. Again, this is going to change around massively, guys. So it's Alonso first. Sebastian Vettel is now in 2nd with Albon 3rd. Gasly is 4th. Magnussen is now 3rd in the Haas. And now Lewis Hamilton goes quickest for Mercedes on a 1:13.4. Let me just quickly do that. And Lando Norris now goes quickest for McLaren by 0.3 of a second to a 1:13.1. And Perez goes up to 5th. I think Alex Albon or Gasly or someone went up there to 9th. But those are all of the times. Right, so let me just confirm who is through. So through, guys, into Q2, it is Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, Sergio Perez has made it through. Don't worry if you are a Red Bull fan. Perez makes it through in 5th place. Verstappen is through in 6th. Magnussen is through in 7th. Albon 8th. Gasly 9th. Lance Stroll is through as well. And the other Aston Martin in P10. And then you got Russell in 11th, as it appears to be raining again, which is interesting. And then you've got Charles Leclerc in P12, so don't worry, Ferrari fans. Leclerc has made it through. Esteban Ocon ends up 13th. Carlos Sainz does just about end up in Q2. So does Daniel Ricciardo, meaning that Latifi, Schumacher, Tsunoda, Zhou and Bottas are out in Q1. And yeah, cheers for that, by the way, Brabham. Yeah, it is hard when you're doing it on your own to try and update the order when the times are constantly updating. But in terms of the bottom 5 positions and who is in what position, I'm going to have to wait to confirm that. Actually, I know how to do it. And actually, hold on. Let me just update that we are about to get into Q2. And obviously, Q2 is a 15-minute long session. I just want to update the bottom 5 positions quickly. Just going to the F1 homepage to do that for you guys. So just give me a couple moments. Right, so in 16th place, it is Nicholas Latifi. Good effort from Latifi. Zhou Guan Yu, 17th. Outqualifies Bottas, who ends up in 18th. And then Tsunoda 19th. And Mick Schumacher, unfortunately, ends up last. So your drivers through to Q2: Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen, Kevin Magnussen, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Lance Stroll, George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Esteban Ocon, Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo. So guys, knocked out in Q1, it is Latifi, Zhou, Bottas, Tsunoda and Mick Schumacher. And Q2 will be underway in a couple minutes time. I'll just get the dotted line ready for you guys to illustrate the cutoff zone for Q2. It'd be interesting if it has started raining again, and if the rain is going to be like, you know, stop-starty for qualifying today, because it really could see a surprise driver end up on pole position. Obviously, back in 2010, Nico Hülkenberg in the Williams ended up on pole in similar conditions. So, yeah, Mick Schumacher on his radio after that, probably very disappointed. And yeah, with Magnussen up in 7th and Schumacher 20th, that to me sounds like a that could be his, you know, his death knell there for his Haas seat. Unfortunately for 2023, as Valtteri Bottas on the radio complaining as well, probably a bit of a surprise that he ended up being knocked out in Q1. I was expecting him to be definitely in Q2 and probably seriously contending for Q3, I've got to be honest. As Charles Leclerc on his team radio complaining about the AlphaTauri ahead. The thing is, though, because they're both on a lap, I don't see what the stewards can do. They're both on a lap. They're both trying to improve. I don't see what the stewards could do about that. And then he backed off, thankfully. But thankfully for McLaren, not McLaren, for Ferrari, they did end up getting both cars into Q2, because was looking a bit risky there. And wasn't the smoothest first qualifying for the Scuderia. And, you know, it's going to be pretty... oh, sorry. It's going to be pretty difficult this weekend. Anyway, for the team, they don't want to make it any more difficult for themselves if they, you know, don't have to. But one thing I will do quickly, guys, is just have a drink to, you know, clear my throat and all. You know, hopefully it will then be in better condition for the rest of the session. So just give me a couple seconds, guys. Right. That should be a bit better, at least for Q2. Yeah, the F1 broadcast just showing a replay of Lando Norris on his quick lap. Hello, by the way, to Anders Eriksson. Good to see you in the chat. Good to see everyone. I know, obviously, it's a weird weekend because it's the sprint. But, yeah, good to see you all here on this Friday evening for qualifying. And we've got the session now started. In 40 seconds' time, I will get the timer on screen and I'll start... I'll sync the timer up at the 14-minute mark, which will be coming up in 30 seconds now. So yeah, we've got most cars now on track. And they're all out on dry tyres. But if it starts raining again, and these drivers can only get an okay-ish lap in on the dry tyres, it could make things very interesting indeed for who gets into Q3. And I'll get the timer synced on the screen for you guys in 3, 2, 1. There you go. 14 minutes to go in Q2. Well, if it ended up being Russell, Leclerc, Ocon, Sainz, Ricciardo knocked out in Q2, that would be very, very surprising. And yeah, looking at the forecast, there is rain coming for sure from all sides from the track. So these drivers have got to do their best lap straight away. They cannot afford to make mistakes or, you know, not have the tyres fired up as much because they will suffer later on. As we're looking at Max Verstappen, the two-time world champion now. I will say with Max, it does feel weird to say that because he's still, to me, a young driver. Is Max. Obviously, his first championship was in very controversial circumstances and was, you know, the way he won it was not good from a, you know, a rules standpoint. But it does feel weird to say he's a two-time world champion and he's only 25. But that's what it is. That's what he is. And yeah, what a season he's had. 14 wins this season, looking for 15. Or his 15th this weekend, and then his 16th next weekend in Abu Dhabi to absolutely, I think, hold the record for a very long time as to the most wins in a season in F1 history. He's done a very good first sector, Max Verstappen, and his middle sector is, well, we'll see how good it is compared to the others. Lando Norris actually does a better middle sector. McLaren have got a pretty good car here. And if it does remain wet or damp or changeable, whatever you want to call it, they are looking good on McLaren. As Max Verstappen goes to the top of the timesheets, Lando Norris, though, now goes to the top of the timesheets by a 1/10 of a second from Verstappen. Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari goes up to 3rd. Let me just quickly update that. So Sainz is up to 3rd. Pierre Gasly is in 4th place. And then you've got Charles Leclerc. I was going to say Charles Leclerc in 5th. It's actually now Esteban Ocon in 5th place. And then we've got Fernando Alonso now up to 3rd for Alpine. And Lewis Hamilton only goes 11th with his first lap. Alex Albon goes all the way up to 4th place. And if it starts to rain now, Williams will be partying for sure. So Albon up to 4th. Then you got Sainz in 5th, Gasly 6th, Ocon 7th, Leclerc is then in 8th place. Pierre Gasly has improved further up to 3rd. Max Verstappen has not improved his lap. Must have been a mistake that I didn't see. But yeah, it's Norris, Verstappen, Gasly, Alonso, Albon, Sainz, Ocon, Leclerc. Vettel is 9th. And then in 10th place, it is Kevin Magnussen. You'll see Felipe Massa in the Ferrari garage. Obviously, he was a real home favourite. 2 wins for the home crowd he accomplished. And it would have been 3 if, Kimi Raikkonen wasn't going for the championship in 2007. As Lewis Hamilton... someone just improved. I thought it was Lewis Hamilton. It wasn't. It was actually Charles Leclerc, who's now up to 5th. George Russell goes up to 8th place. And Lewis Hamilton, another poor lap. And he's only 13th. What is going on with Lewis Hamilton? But the top 10, with 10 minutes to go, it's Norris, Verstappen, Gasly, Alonso, Leclerc, Albon, Sainz, Russell, Ocon, and Vettel. And in the drop zone, Magnussen, Perez in the Red Bull, Hamilton 13th, Ricciardo 14th, and Lance Stroll in 15th. Kevin Magnussen, though, has just done a purple first sector and is on a much better lap as Lance Stroll goes up to P10. Kevin Magnussen goes 4th for Haas F1. He's doing very well today, is Kevin. In the conditions, so the drop zone now, Stroll, Vettel, Perez, Hamilton, Ricciardo. There's 11 World Championships worth of talent in the drop zone currently. As Daniel Ricciardo, after the first 2 sectors, doing enough, just about to get into Q3 for the moment. As Carlos Sainz goes up to 6th place. Sergio Perez now goes up to 5th. That's a decent lap. He might need to do a few more laps, though, just to make sure. Daniel Ricciardo is up to 10th. And Fernando Alonso goes quickest for Alpine, despite having a car right in front of him. So Fernando Alonso up to P1 on a 1:11.3, 0.2 of a second nearly quicker than Norris, as there's a Alpine engineer there holding his arm out, waiting for the rain. That's how close it is, and this is what I mean. You've got to get your laps in here, your best laps in, really. Lewis Hamilton currently in the pits. He's really at risk here of getting knocked out. Got to get your laps in, really, here, because if that rain falls right now, it will be disaster for the people in the drop zone, which, the 2 Mercedes are in the drop zone currently. As Max Verstappen completes another lap, and he goes up to P1 by 0.07 of a second. So Verstappen quickest on I think a low 1:11.3. So it's currently Verstappen, Alonso, Norris, Gasly, Magnussen, and then Perez, Sainz, Leclerc, and then Ocon is 9th with Albon 10th, and then it is Vettel in 11th. Currently with Ricciardo 12th, as hard to tell from that camera that's got a bit of rain on it whether it's actually raining or not. Currently in the drop zone with 7.5 minutes to go, it is Vettel 11th, Ricciardo 12th, Russell is 13th with Stroll in 14th, and Lewis Hamilton 15th. And Russell and Hamilton, the 2 Mercedes, are currently on an outlap on the soft compound tyres, as Charles Leclerc is now up to 3rd in the Ferrari. And Verstappen says it's definitely getting darker here. Bit of rain, bit of drizzle, as Lance Stroll comes back into the pit. So he's either ran out of fuel or he knows it's raining now. Which, if that is the case, then Mercedes are fucked, because they're 13th and 15th. And yeah, it looks as though it's raining, or it's at least started to drizzle. And Mercedes on the pit wall are just hoping that somehow a lap can be got in. George Russell is on track. He's done a personal best first sector, but can he have enough pace in the final 2 sectors to get into Q3? Very good middle sector. 0.75 of a second up on Alex Albon in P10, the time he needs to improve on. So even if it does rain right now, he should, Russell, get himself into the top 10. And George Russell goes up to 3rd place. That is critical for Mercedes. And Lewis Hamilton has only started the middle sector a couple corners ago. So he's got to hope, Hamilton, that the rain doesn't start to fall. Because, this could really be big trouble for him. But he has improved his first sector, has Lewis Hamilton. And yep, he's done a good enough, I guess you could call it, middle sector. Only 0.3 of a second up on Ocon, the man in P10, after the first 2 sectors. And to the line he comes, and he should go into the top 10. Where does he go? He goes up to 4th place. If it does rain now, then yeah, Mercedes should be fine. As we've now got 5 minutes to go in this session. And in the drop zone now, Ocon, Albon, Vettel, Ricciardo and Stroll. Carlos Sainz, now the man on the cusp. Ferrari will be hoping desperately that they can get away with things here. Sebastian Vettel has done his first sector on his another flying lap. As Sainz says it's raining a lot. And I was going to say with Vettel, yeah, he's not improved his first sector. He's going at a decent speed though, so maybe this middle sector will be good enough. Let's see. No, it won't. It's raining. Yeah, it's raining. There's nothing Vettel can do unless somehow it dries up in the final 4 minutes. But I don't see that happening. Lance Stroll is on a actually pretty good lap. He's in 15th. He's done a personal best first and second sector. Let's see as he comes to the line where he goes. Currently in P15, Stroll. Can he sneak his way into the top 10? No, he's not had a good final sector. The car ahead of him, which might have affected him. And he stays in 15th place. And that could be very well curtains for Aston Martin. We know they've not been great qualifiers this season. But I think this is more just being a bit unlucky with the conditions. Because their car is actually decently quick, from what I've seen so far. Sebastian Vettel, though, is on another flying lap, I think. Max Verstappen has just done a purple first sector, so clearly there is still some grip out there on the track. And yeah, Vettel has improved his first sector. What is middle sector looking like? It's a 1/10.5 up on Carlos Sainz. Sainz was saying on the radio it's raining a lot. He better hope it starts absolutely chucking it down now, because he could be at serious risk here of being knocked out in Q2 as Vettel comes to the line and goes up to 8th place. Critical lap from Sebastian Vettel. And Carlos Sainz now into the drop zone as Sergio Perez is up to 4th place. Max Verstappen has improved his lap even further and is now, I think, half a second quicker than, I think Lando Norris is now second. There's a replay of a bird almost flying into the path of Vettel's car. Yeah, Lando Norris is now up to second. Alex Albon has got back into the top 10. Leclerc is now up to 3rd. Actually up to 2nd, sorry. So it's Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, and then Alonso 4th. Perez is 5th. And then Russell actually is now up to 3rd. As Carlos Sainz, currently 13th, goes all the way up to 2nd position. So Carlos Sainz gets himself into Q3 for now with just under 2 minutes to go. Into Q3 at the moment with 90 seconds left pretty much. It is Verstappen, Sainz, Leclerc, Russell, Norris, Alonso, Perez, Hamilton, Ocon in 9th and Albon in 10th. And then it's Gasly, Vettel, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Stroll in the drop zone. Magnussen, though, has improved his middle sector. Can he find his way into Q3? But now he can. He goes up to 7th place. Great job there by Magnussen. He might still need, though, another lap to make sure And that pushes Alex Albon into the drop zone as Lance Stroll, by the looks of it, has backed off. And he's going to go for one final attempt, I'm guessing, is Stroll. Yep, he is. They're in the drop zone now. Albon, Gasly, Vettel, Ricciardo, Stroll. Let's see in these final 40 seconds who ends up getting knocked out. We could very well have a shock here because Perez and Hamilton, they're very close to the drop zone. Lewis Hamilton is only a tenth of a second away from Albon, who is in the drop zone in 11th place. So, yeah. Alex Albon has pitted, so Albon is out. Good driving, though, from Albon. He's done the best, really, he could have done in this session. And here's a replay of Sebastian Vettel running wide at turn 1, going to the escape road, and Sebastian Vettel is out in Q2, and Stroll has done the same thing, locked the inside front and gone deep. So the two Aston Martins are out in Q2. We'll just quickly... Daniel Ricciardo is out as well in 14th. Just want to see with Pierre Gasly what happens with him. I'm assuming he's out as well. Yep, he is. So, let me just quickly read out the final finishing order of Q2. So, into Q3, the shootout, guys, it is Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lando Norris, Fernando Alonso, Kevin Magnussen, Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton, and Esteban Ocon. And knocked out in Q2, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Sebastian Vettel, Daniel Ricciardo, and Lance Stroll. And Q3 will be underway in, probably 5 minutes from now. Let me know in the chat, guys, who do you think gets pole? Will it be Verstappen? Will it be a Ferrari driver of Sainz or Leclerc? Maybe a Mercedes driver? Maybe even Lando Norris, with the conditions changing in the way they are. Honestly, I don't think we can sit here and say for sure what's going to happen. So, yeah, anything could happen in this, in this final Q3 coming up. Trying to look in the chat to see what you guys have to say. Brabham says Russell needs to beat Hamilton next year. I know Hamilton is Hamilton, but he'll be 38 next year. If you are to be considered top shelf, you have to be beating your 38-year-old teammate. I see what you mean, but I don't think, with the way athletes are these days, I don't think 38 is, that bad of an age, really. I mean, we've seen in football, in tennis, and other sports that, people are able to maintain top performance way past other older sportsmen in their time periods. I think the best case is to look at tennis, actually, where, the best tennis players 20 years ago were retiring at like 32, 33. And, you had, Roger Federer retire at, 40 years old. And then you got, Djokovic and Nadal, 36, 35. So, and we've seen with F1 drivers, haven't we? You got Fernando Alonso, 40 years old. Kimi Räikkönen was 40. Lewis Hamilton's going to still maybe be on the grid when he's 40 as well. So, yeah. I don't think the age is necessarily that important. I do see what you mean, though. So, no problem with what you've said there. But there is from his point of view, if he really wants to be the team leader for Mercedes in the future, which he really should be, as Lewis Hamilton, I don't think has many years left in F1. He probably does need to beat Hamilton in a fair fight, in, say, a car that is a proper race-winning car during the course of a season. I know, obviously, he's currently ahead of Hamilton in the championship right now, but the gap is only, 15 points, and there's 2 races to go, and it could easily swing Lewis Hamilton's way. And we have to remember that Hamilton has had, I think, more DNFs this season, or not. Has he had more DNFs this season? Well, actually, we have to remember that, one of those DNFs was because of Lewis Hamilton at Spa. But I think the point I'm trying to make is Hamilton has been unluckier than Russell this season. So, yeah. According to the weather forecast, it will be dropping rain at times. So yeah, that just means that the conditions are just going to constantly evolve, and there's no way of reading it, which is, honestly, that's the best thing we can have from this final Q3 session. Who knows? Kevin Magnussen could end up on pole position. Or even, an Esteban Ocon. Obviously, Magnussen and Ocon have never had pole position. Neither has Lando. Oh, no, Lando Norris did, sorry, in Russia. I think, actually, Magnussen and Ocon are the only two drivers in the top 10 for Q3 who've never had pole position. But to be honest, I think going into the session, I mean, drivers like Magnussen and Ocon, I don't think they're going to sit there and have the expectation that pole position is possible. But if they can put in, some good laps, given whatever the conditions are like, there's a chance for them. There's a really good chance for them. Again, Nico Hülkenberg in very similar conditions 12 years ago got pole position. So, it's absolutely possible. As Karun Chandog is just looking at a replay of Sebastian Vettel at turn 1 on his final attempt in Q2. And yeah, just running wide because there was no grip. Then Lance Stroll just locking the inside front because the tyres had gone too cold. Oh no, actually, this is a different replay of Stroll going through turn 2 on a previous lap and clumping the inside curb a bit too hard. And then I'm guessing backs off on his lap, possibly. I'm not sure exactly what Karun is showing us here. Prank says, always Max Chazza. Lab Gorilla says, come on, Sainz. Simon says, Ferrari having a yo-yo day. Yeah, absolutely. Prank says, Lewis did the testing on the new parts this year. George didn't really beat him. Yeah, we have to remember that as well. Hamilton wasn't exactly given the most smoothest of times this season by his own team. Anders Ericsson says, sad to say, but I think mixed time at Haas is over. What do you say? Yeah. I mean, I hope he keeps a seat because I think, if you keep him there and give him another chance, I think he'll reward them, but I don't think they will give him another chance. From what I've heard of what they've had to say, I think Hülkenberg will be the one at Haas next season, which, I mean, yeah, there'll be more consistency there for Haas, but will there be any more pace and talent? I'm not really sure there will be. As Q3 is about to begin, guys, all of the drivers are at the exit of the pit lane. Kevin Magnussen is the first one, which could be crucial, because if he stays ahead of the cars behind, then he could really benefit if they, if the rain really starts to pour. But red light still at the exit of the pit lane. I will sync up the timer on screen at the 11-minute mark for the final, 11 minutes of qualifying. And yeah, still waiting for the light to go green. It's gone very dark in Brazil. Sao Paulo. And in Sao Paulo, I think they're 2 hours. Is it 2 or 3 hours behind us in the UK? I think 2 hours. As Charles Leclerc, oh dear, Ferrari, massive gamble here. They put Leclerc out on Inters, and he's the only car out of the top 10 on the Inters. So they're gambling that it's going to start properly raining in the next minute or so for intermediate tyres, and that he's going to end up benefiting from it. Obviously, if it works, that's great, but if it doesn't, then he'll end up in P10 for tomorrow's sprint race, and that would end all chances of a race win on Sunday for the Ferrari team. But yeah, Q3 is underway. I'll get the timer on screen in 3, 2, 1. there you go. 11 minutes to go in Q3. Get F1 on track. Everyone on the soft tyre except for Charles Leclerc on the intermediate tyre. And I will just quickly have a drink of my water to help my throat for this final 10 minutes. And yeah, Leclerc being overtaken by quite a few cars on this outlap. So, yeah. Looking at the track, I think that's a mistake from Ferrari. Because even if it starts to rain, it's not going to be just an instant massive downpour. And even with a bit of rain, the dry tyres are not just going to be falling off, you know, massively. It's not like we have grooved tyres, where back then grooved dry tyres really would be falling off massively, even with just a slight bit of rain. As Leclerc has begun his lap, everyone has now begun their first laps in Q3. Leclerc holding up a Red Bull right behind him and losing the rear end massively on the exit of turn 4. And we basically got a racing situation here between Charles Leclerc and I think it is Sergio Perez. Is it Sergio Perez? I can't see. I should look at the T-cam thing, to be honest, but I always tend to look for the helmet or the driver number. As I think that was Max Verstappen going through the final corner. So yeah, I think it's Sergio. It is. Sergio Perez is the one stuck behind Leclerc as Kevin Magnussen goes quickest for Haas. Max Verstappen only goes second as Charles Leclerc comes into the pit, so the gamble has not paid off. Carlos Sainz goes third. Sergio Perez is fourth. Now it's Esteban Ocon up to fourth place, with Alonso in Russell. Alonso up to fifth. Russell is now third. Is a replay of Leclerc on the exit turn 4, and yeah, just losing the rear end massively, and yeah, those tyres just not good enough for the conditions. And that's I thought I saw Leclerc wave his hand about. He was like jinking to come into the pits before he started his flying lap, and then he decided, or Ferrari decided at the very last minute, to keep him out, as George Russell has parked it, or not parked it, he's beached it in the gravel, and we've got a red flag. And Russell in the gravel trap at turn 4. Is it turn 4? Might be turn 5, I'm not quite sure. But that is a shame for Russell. But if it does start to absolutely rocket down with rain now, Kevin Magnussen will be on pole position for the sprint. Haas have never had a pole for a sprint or a Grand Prix. That would be something incredible. But let me just quickly, whilst we've got a red flag, let me just quickly do the order, as Russell is instructing the marshals to give him a push. Don't think they're allowed to, though, if his engine is still off, and he's pretty beached in the gravel there. So, it is currently, with 8 minutes and 10 seconds to go, and we have a red flag, by the way, guys. It is currently Magnussen quickest, from Verstappen second, Russell third, Lando Norris is in fourth, with Sainz in fifth, Ocon sixth, Alonso seventh, Hamilton is eighth, and then Perez ninth, Leclerc 10th. What a grid that would be. As Leclerc back into the pits and probably moaning, rightfully so. Ferrari went for the gamble, but yeah, did not pay off. And yeah, if it does, and yeah, you can see some rain falling in the pit lane there. If that keeps intensifying, then Leclerc is, yeah, probably going to be starting from 10th. As George Russell kicks the gravel, very frustrated. I mean, if the session does end, you know, with the results the way it is now, he shouldn't be too disappointed, because he is third on the grid. And obviously, if it was a dry sprint race, Russell would have a good chance at probably finishing second in the sprint and starting on the front row for the race on Sunday. So he shouldn't be too down. I mean, obviously, there was a chance at pole. And what he did, yeah, it was exit at turn 4. He locked up. That's a very silly way he got beached in the gravel. So into turn 4, he took a too wide of an entry into turn 4, clipped the grass, locked up, went deep. Then he got his car onto the concrete just after the gravel, but then spun round and spun back into the gravel and then got himself beached in the gravel. I think, though, his car was probably damaged because he bounced quite heavily through the gravel there. So I don't think he would have been able really to improve. But let me just quickly display on the screen that we have a red flag. Let me just, hold on, adjust this quickly. So there you go. We have a red flag with 8 minutes and 10 seconds to go. And Haas, they are looking very, very happy. And they're not trying to get too excited because you never know what could happen. The red flag might be out long enough for it to dry up again. But yeah, they look very, very excited because they know they are on the precipice of something massive. Yeah, if they were to get pole today, even though, yeah, I mean, it is, due to them being right place, right time. At the end of the day, Magnussen had to produce the lap he did and had to do what he did, and Haas obviously got it right with when they sent him out on track. It would just be such a great thing. And obviously a new team starting a sprint or a race on pole position. It's something. And I don't think anyone had Haas F1 on pole for the sprint as something as of a possibility. I think a lot of people wouldn't have even predicted them to be in the top 10, never mind on pole. But yeah, so still red flag. I think the red flags, have they gone in now? I think they have. So I think the red flags have now cleared. So I'll get the timer ready because obviously 8 minutes and 10 seconds to go. And as soon as it starts ticking down, so the session will resume in 2 minutes' time. Looking at the weather forecast, there is still a possibility that you could maybe get another lap in on dry tyres because the rain, it's like, it's not absolutely here yet, I don't think. We aren't obviously seeing any, footage of the track, so can't really say. Does that? That's great. There's a Haas F1 fan in the stands with a Haas hat, and he can't believe his luck. He's probably the only Haas fan in the crowd. And they are, set to be on pole for the sprint if it continues to rain. Max Verstappen, we're currently looking at in the Red Bull garage. To be honest, I don't think Max would be that bothered if Magnussen was on pole, because obviously he'd beat him in the sprint and the race on the Sunday. But what do you call it? He's ahead of all of his key rivals, and really the only people he needs to worry about is Leclerc and Hamilton, I would say, in these conditions. So, yeah, I don't think Verstappen, honestly, would be that bothered lining up in second. Yeah, looking at the weather radar, I think we might have pretty much now an end to qualifying. And let me just get rid of that, and I will get the timer back on the screen in about 15 seconds time. The session has now restarted. And yeah, I will get the timer on screen, hopefully at the 8-minute mark, if they actually show the timer. They're not showing the timer, so I can't... now they will. Sergio Perez, interestingly, has come out on intermediate tyres. Maybe they think that, it's worth a gamble. I will sync up the timer, guys, at the 7-minute mark for the timer on the screen, so don't worry about that. But yeah, Perez, only man on track right now. There's Fernando Alonso in the garage. To be honest, Alpine have got a decent result at the minute, 6th and 7th. That's not too bad. I mean, Lando Norris is up in 4th place, which is not great, but 6th and 7th is that's about where you would hope for them to be, realistically, for a Grand Prix. As I'll get the timer on the screen in 3, 2, 1. There you go. 7 minutes to go, guys, in qualifying. Let me know in the chat, do you think Kevin Magnussen are going to... do you think Kevin Magnussen, is going to hold on to pole here? Let me know in the live chat. I just want to read a comment quickly from Dustin, who says, haha, joined late. Turned on chance on Q3 right as folks mentioned rain starting, then Russell. Ha. I cannot imagine a better moment to join after the day I've had. Well, good to have you here, and yeah, hopefully, if you have had a bit of a travel day or whatever, and this goes for everyone, then Sergio Perez is coming back into the pits because the track is quite a bit wetter than it was at the start of Q3, and I think, guys, this session is pretty much a done deal. Kevin Magnussen, I think, as Gunther Steiner is now on the phone, probably to Gene Haas, the owner of the Haas F1 team and the Haas racing team, because obviously they race in NASCAR as well. Yeah, great to have you guys here, obviously. But yeah, if anyone's having, a also troubled day, hopefully I can be of some help to that. Charles Leclerc now talking with Laurent Mekies, the sporting director of Ferrari, on the Ferrari pit wall, and he looks, pretty upset. Obviously, P10, not where he was expecting to qualify. And the thing is, because he's got Hamilton ahead of him, Sainz ahead of him, Perez ahead of him, Russell ahead of him. I mean, Leclerc will pass probably Ocon, Alonso, Norris, Magnussen in the sprint tomorrow, but what do you call it with Charles Leclerc? Beating Hamilton, Perez, Russell, Sainz, it'll be pretty hard because we know the Ferrari, with more fuel on board, they just do struggle. We know that, as Max Verstappen is out of his car now. And I think, guys, that is qualifying over and done with. So I think I'm just going to what do you call it? I'm just going to get rid of the timer and say that, qualifying is now over. So let me just quickly do that now. So there you go, guys. A bit of a anticlimactic finish, but yeah, that is qualifying over and done with. So, as Kevin Magnussen, very, very happy, and the Haas and everyone in the crowd applauding, which is great to see. Obviously, Haas F1, they've worked so hard over the last few years to try and be competitive, and to have this is such a great thing. It really, really is. But Lewis Hamilton is actually coming out on track on intermediate tyres. But I don't see how he's going to improve unless they think the rain has eased off. But I don't see how that will be the case. But if he does improve somehow, I will let you guys know. And yeah, I don't think he's going to improve at all. But that is Q3, guys, over and done with. Let me go through the final order of qualifying. And this is your starting grid for the sprint tomorrow evening. Kevin Magnussen on pole position for the first time in his F1 career. And the first time Haas has been on pole for an F1 sprint. Max Verstappen will line up in second, with Russell third, Norris fourth, Sainz fifth, Ocon sixth, Alonso seventh, Hamilton eighth, Perez ninth, and Leclerc in 10th. And then it'll be Albon 11th, Gasly 12th, Vettel 13th, Ricciardo 14th, Stroll 15th, and then Latifi, Zhou, Bottas, Tsunoda, and Schumacher completing the rest of the field. What a grid that is. And to be honest, the sprint tomorrow should be pretty entertaining, given, you know, the mixed up grid. So yeah, and yeah, Lewis Hamilton coming back into the pits. The Mercedes, no, there's no way of improving. But yeah, one thing I do want to say, actually a couple of things I want to say quick. Firstly, make sure, guys, to stick around for another half an hour here with the stream, because for the next half an hour I will be reacting with you guys to what's happened in qualifying today. So let me know in the chat, guys, what did you think of qualifying today? What do you think of Kevin Magnussen on pole position? That is so great to see. I'm so happy for him. I've always been a big Magnussen fan, and yeah, he's going absolutely mental in the Haas garage. That is so great to see. I've always been a big Magnussen fan. I thought he was very harshly treated by McLaren. I thought his debut season was actually pretty good at McLaren. And, you know, what he's been through with Haas F1, obviously in 2018, he was such a good driver that year. You know, was off the grid last year, came back on the grid this year, and yeah, just a superb story. And with Kevin Magnussen, or not Magnussen, but the Haas team, which obviously Magnussen is a part of, as Gunther Steiner waving to the people above the pits and the garage, and Gunther Steiner now giving Magnussen a big hug. That is great to see. What was I going to say? Yeah, it's great also because you might remember, guys, obviously their home race was 3 weeks ago at the Circuit of Americas, and they had, I think, the sad passing of one of their engineers. I can't remember his name, unfortunately, which I'm, you know, frustrated that I don't remember his name, but this is a very good tribute for him. Very good tribute for him. Yeah, very, very good, and great for the Haas team, who, again, they've been struggling for a few years, but they have, yeah, got their just reward for working as hard as they have. Great to see. Anyway, I'm going to post a link out a couple times on my community tab and on Twitter, and then we'll get into what you guys have to say in the live chat. Come join us here for instant reaction to qualifying at the Sao Paulo GP, where Kevin Magnussen has ended up on pole. And I'll just quickly post down Twitter, and then I'll get to all of your comments, guys, in the live chat in a minute or so. So, yeah, let me just quickly go to Twitter and get this done. I'm sure plenty of people on Twitter celebrating. So let me just quickly do this now. So, yeah, come join us here for instant reaction to qualifying for Sao Paulo Grand Prix. And I'll just do some hashtags quickly. Let me just, yeah, post the link and do this hashtags, and then I'll get to your comments. So yeah, You know, you can let me know what you thought of qualifying, or you can let me know, you know, what do you think going into tomorrow's sprint race? What do you think is going to happen? What are your initial thoughts, I guess, going into the sprint tomorrow? Let me know in the live chat. I'll be curious to see what you guys have to say. I think we're in for a pretty good sprint. I think F1 has lucked in to a good grid for the sprint, because it'll probably end up being quite exciting. But yeah, let me know what you think in the chat. And let me just do a final few hashtags. Right, there you go. So, let me just post that out on Twitter. There you go. So, hopefully we get some people coming to the stream. Great to see the, well, not a porn bot. That's great to see. At least it's not that. Let's get into your comments in the chat. By the way, remember, Rook, that Carlos Sainz's 5th-place engine penalty will not be applied until the race on Sunday. So Carlos Sainz will start in 5th place. But if he was to finish in 5th, he'll start from 10th, of course. Simon says, God has left the Tifosi, it seems. Prank says, Ferrari went full Duresta and a shit show. Other than that, great fun. Turbo says, who replaced Magnussen at McLaren? Was it Van Dorn? It was a certain man named Fernando Alonso in 2015. And yeah, to be honest, looking back, I think he deserved to stay. But yeah, great that he's getting this result here. Simon saying, fair dues to Kevin. Turbo even saying he forgot he raced for McLaren. Yeah, 8 years ago. It's amazing to think it was 8 years ago that the V6 hybrid era began. Brother Mars makes a great point. Magnussen first, Mick Schumacher 20th. Yeah, that is not good, obviously, for Mick, but that's very rare that we get that in the same team, one driver ends up on pole position and the other ends up at the back. Very rare that we get that in Formula 1. Bradman says, too bad it wasn't Mick. They would have to give him another year if he did that. Yeah, that is true. And it would have been nice, obviously, because of his father and all of that, if it was him. But let's give, you know, our credit to Kevin Magnussen, because even though, yeah, they did luck in with the conditions being the way they were at the right time, and, you know, it was right place, right time for them, but, you know, they did the great job of getting to the end of the pit lane on the green light for, you know, Q3 starting. He kept ahead of all the cars behind, and then he did the lap he needed to do. So he executed, and Haas executed exactly what they needed to do. And that's why he has got his first pole position in Formula 1. And he's always been a very quick driver, Magnussen, on a Saturday. Even we saw back in his McLaren days, he was very, very quick sometimes in qualifying. I think his first ever qualifying session in Melbourne in 2014, he qualified 4th and then ended up in the race finishing in 2nd. So it shows you he's always been a good driver, but hasn't always got the respect that he should have had. Count Blast said this season's become a bit sad. Brabham says Haas pretty much locking the fact their wheels will fall off tomorrow. To be honest, looking at what do you call it, the order, Magnussen probably, considering it's a 24 or 25 lap sprint race, if he could finish 7th or 8th, that would be, I think, a pretty good starting position for him. And then, you know, if it's a dry race, which we are, well, at the minute, it seems as though it is going to be a dry race, then, you know, if Haas F1 go for the right tyre choice, as he gives a big hug to Felipe Massa, who's awarding him the pole position trophy. What was I going to say? Yeah, if it's a dry race on Sunday and Haas go for the right tyre choice to start the race with, he could absolutely get a few points for Haas, which would probably confirm them finishing 8th in the championship, which would be a decent result for them, considering the season they've had. Rook says, if only it wasn't a sprint race weekend, indeed. Indeed. Let me find some other comments here if I can in the chat. Will Chan says Magnussen will do a madness tomorrow. I hope he does. If he could win the sprint, that would be something. Obviously, 10 points for winning the sprint. Simon says Mag on pole. Fernando is not complaining about another driver. Strange day indeed. Berman says if you're a 10th or 2 from Max, you are clearly a very fast driver. That's true. Turbo says, parts of me think that Ricciardo in this year or last year's Red Bull Honda, we would see the old fast race-winning Ricciardo and even do better than Perez. There are also times I think he would struggle still in the Red Bull. Yeah, I think with Ricciardo, I think his issues at McLaren have not just been that the car hasn't suited him. It's also been that because of what happened during the COVID pandemic, you know, Australians that weren't in Australia weren't able to be in Australia when the pandemic, you know, really got going. You know, they weren't able to come back to Australia and they weren't able to see their family and all of that. And it affected a lot of people, not just Daniel Ricciardo, but a lot of people. And he talked about it, that, you know, it was something that he really liked having. And I think if you look at Drive to Survive, I think in the first season, I don't watch Drive to Survive anymore, but I did watch, I think, the first season of it. What do you call it? I think they even did a piece on it with him about, you know, how important I think family is to him and that need in a summer break to go back and see his family, and even in the winter break, you know, it is a really important thing. And from his point of view, you know, it would have hurt him, definitely. But, you know, rules are rules. And to be honest, the rules that Australia had, even though it was heartbreaking, they had to have those rules because of, you know, the pandemic and all of that. So, yeah, I think that definitely played a significant factor for Ricciardo, because he was unable then to get properly started with McLaren in 2021. And that left him on the back foot compared to Norris. And then, yeah, for 2022, just couldn't really carry, unfortunately, any confidence through to 2022. But if he was in the Red Bull now, I mean, the Red Bull car is a lot better than the McLaren. He would still get some decent results. But, yeah, I don't think Ricciardo is at his best anymore, unfortunately. Turbo says, why did Renault drop K-Mag? They dropped him for Hulkenberg. The reason they dropped him was because towards the end of the season, Jolie and Palmer, I think, outraced him towards the final few races of that season, 2016. And I think they had like a little battle where Renault basically said, right, whoever wins or comes out on top in the last few races of the season will be driving for us in 2017. And then, yeah, Palmer had a better end to the season. Magnussen was obviously better than Palmer, but yeah, what happened. And yeah, looking back for Renault, that was a very poor decision, because Magnussen would have been a very good driver to have with his, you know, how quick he is over a single lap. To be honest, though, he probably would have ended up getting dropped from Renault for Daniel Ricciardo a couple of years later anyway. So, yeah. But, yeah. Magnussen has had an unlucky career. Hasn't been, I don't know, you know, sometimes he does crash with people. He isn't the cleanest driver when it comes to racing, and he is quite clumsy. We know that. But when you look at how quick the guy is, he absolutely deserves to be in Formula One on a long-term basis. He's always been stunningly quick, and he's proved that today, of course, by getting pole position for the sprint. His first ever pole position. I'm very happy for the guy. Let me find some other comments here if I can. Hunter says, why is Alonso stuck at 7th in every race in qualifying? Well, if you're in an Alpine, that's basically like a race win, so not too bad. Turbo says, I have memories of K-Mag's season with Renault being really bad. Don't remember if it was his fault or not. No, it wasn't his fault. It was the Renault car that year was just terrible. Didn't really have any power, and because they took over the Lotus car from 2015, that was, you know, it didn't have a lot of downforce, the 2015 Lotus, but they had the Mercedes power unit in 2015, which is why they had a decent season. Obviously, when they switched over to Renault power units and they became the Renault Works team, Renault Works team, that really affected them in 2016. But yeah, it wasn't Magnussen's fault. Renault just didn't have any pace that season. He did get there. I remember a 7th place in Russia that year, which was a very good drive, and I think he did a very good overtake that race. So if I can remember, I think around the outside of another driver of turn 3 in Russia. Yeah, it was a great move. It might have been later on, actually, with Haas F1, I think. I'm not sure. But yeah, he was unlucky there, was Magnussen, with how things played out. Himesh says, man, best qualifying ever. Laughing my ass off, not even upset with George. Always wanted to see a Magnussen pole. Turbo says, I view K-Mag as kind of a journeyman in F1. He had a father that raced in F1 also. Yeah, Jan Magnussen. Jan Magnussen was a very good driver in junior Formula, but when Jan came to F1, he just didn't perform, and he ended up getting dropped, I think, midway through 1997, if I remember correctly. So yeah, his father didn't quite make it in F1, but obviously Kevin has been and is a much better driver than his father ever was, and I think Kevin and Jan, they still were racing together in LMP cars or GT cars, was it? Last year or the year before, I think. So, yeah. As good Steiner currently being interviewed by Sky F1. Good to see him so happy. And yeah, it's been a tough season for Haas. I know they started the season well, they dropped off, but because they lost the sponsorship, the Ural Kali sponsorship, I think it is, the Mazepin sponsorship. It really was, as Max Verstappen just given him quickly congratulations for pole. Yeah, losing the sponsorship really affected them because they just couldn't develop this car as much as they wanted to. So Haas really could have been, they could have been serious contenders for a 5th, 6th place in the championship this year, because you have to remember last year, last in the championship, and they had for this year, and they have had for this year, the most wind tunnel testing time out of any team. But again, because they've lacked the money to run at the level of the cap, which thankfully they'll be able to do next year because they now have a title sponsor in MoneyGram, yeah, they just weren't able to take or capitalize on that advantage. So yeah, disappointing there for Haas, but like I said, they've worked so hard and they deserve what they've gotten, because they've worked so hard for a result like this. Also, Sky F1 have just put out a stat that Haas F1 are the first US-owned constructor to take pole since the Shadow Team at the 1975 British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Wow. That is a long time. 1975 was what? It's almost 50 years ago. Yeah. Just incredible. Absolutely incredible. Let me just have a quick look to see what happened in that particular Grand Prix. I know that year Niki Lauda won the championship for the first time. Yeah, Tom Price, obviously, rest in peace to him. Obviously, he's been unfortunately dead for a while because he, passed away in the late 70s because of a very bad accident where he collided with a fan. But fucking hell, my throat is really going. Yeah, Tom Price was a really good driver. If you ask anyone from that time period about Tom Price, they will, rate him very highly. So yeah, he was the man who ended up on pole for his home Grand Prix, and then in the race he ended up finishing. Well, he didn't end up finishing, I don't think. No, he had some sort of accident, and Emerson Fittipaldi, the two-time champion, F1 champion, ended up winning that race. And actually, hold on. I think I remember this race actually. So if you can actually go looking on YouTube if you want. If you Google like 1975 British Grand Prix end or final laps or something like that, you should go and watch it because it was mental. Basically, right as the race was ending in the final lap or so, it started to chuck down with rain, and almost every car had a crash and, ended up not meeting the checkered flag. For example, Emerson Fittipaldi won the race. The people in second, third, fourth, and fifth, they finished, but they didn't cross the line. They just retired from the race with an accident. So Fittipaldi ended up winning by a full lap. But yeah, heavy rain ended up coming at the end of that race. So if you ever want to see a crazy end to a Grand Prix, then go and look for that, because that's I've seen that before. It's quite a funny one. I can see Russell pull a coater on Max tomorrow, says Grandmaster Yoda. Let's hope not. Because Russell's got he's got a really good position actually for the race. I know obviously he had his crash here in qualifying, but he's most likely going to start the race on the front row on Sunday, and that gives him a decent chance at a very good result for the Grand Prix. So yeah. Doesn't need to be too aggressive, does Russell? Obviously, yeah, if he gets ahead of Max Verstappen, then on the first lap and ends up keeping him behind, then obviously he'll start the race most likely on pole position on Sunday. But yeah, realistically, I think we still know that Red Bull and Verstappen are the ones to beat. Will F1 makes a great point that Jan Magnussen did one race for McLaren in 95 in place of Hakkinen. Yeah, he did. And also points out that Magnussen did the whole season in 97, got dropped midway through 98, right? After scoring his only F1 point, yeah. Yeah. Now I'm thinking of it. Yeah, I did get that wrong. Thanks for correcting me. Normally I don't get things wrong, but I can't, I'm not a supercomputer. I can't be expected to get everything absolutely bang on. So cheers for correcting me there, Will. Turbo says, Russell take out Max, bet on it, both in the sprint and the actual race, and Lewis P1 for the win and Magnussen P3 in the race. That would be something. Right, the final comment I'll go on to in this reaction, because I'm pretty much done here, because, yeah, we've, we've been, it's been about 35 minutes, hasn't it, since the session ended. I'll read out one final comment from Turbo GSR, who, actually, I'll read out two final comments. One from Chiller, who says, as a Dane myself, and that's the reason I want to read this out, seeing K-Mag on pole is the most beautiful thing I've seen since his rookie podium in 2014. Yeah, I really hope you're, happy with what's happened today, because, yeah, it is really great to see, whether you're Danish or not. But, yeah, if you're Danish, this has got to be a very proud day for you. And for Turbo GSR, his final comment, he asks, are rumours generally correct, you think, Chazza, that Chinese Grand Prix next year is a virtual no-go, just waiting for an official announcement? It's cancelled, yeah. I don't think we're going to have a Chinese Grand Prix next year, because they are still pursuing the zero COVID policy. And, yeah, I just don't see how we're going to have an F1 race next year. Stefano Domenicali, the person running F1, has even said, yeah, the chances are not looking good for a race there at the moment. But he did say that it will not be replaced, which is a bit disappointing, because it means we'll have like a 3-4 week break in between races, which is a bit disappointing. But as Kevin Magnussen, by the way, just gave Rubens Barrichello a big hug. As Magnussen now being interviewed on Sky F1, which is good to see. But yeah, Chinese Grand Prix, I don't think it's going to happen. So it'll be 23 races on the calendar next year. I mean, we'll see. Maybe we'll get a Chinese Grand Prix. Who knows? But guys, thanks for coming along for this qualifying watch along. It's been fantastic to have you guys along for this evening. Make sure, whether you're new to the channel or a subscriber, make sure to join me tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. UK time for the sprint race preview, where we're going to be going through everything that happened here in qualifying, getting into the data, looking at, just what happened in qualifying, and obviously previewing what to expect in the sprint race itself. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing in tomorrow's stream. Obviously from 5:30 p.m. UK time until 7 p.m. will be the sprint race preview. From 7 till 8 p.m. UK time will be the sprint race watch along. The sprint race starts at 7:30 p.m. UK time, and then for at least half an hour after the sprint is finished, I'll be reacting with you guys to the events of that sprint. And then on the race on Sunday, of course, I'll be live at 4 p.m. UK time for that. Till 5:30 p.m. I'll be doing the race preview. 5:30 p.m. UK time till 8 p.m. UK time will be the race watch along on Sunday for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. The race starts at 6 p.m. UK time. And then for an hour after that, I'll be reacting with you guys to the events of the Sao Paulo Grand Prix on Sunday. Who knows what's going to happen this weekend after the start we've had to this weekend with Kevin Magnussen on pole for the sprint tomorrow. It is going to be something special. So make sure, guys, to join me tomorrow for the sprint. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Also, don't forget to smash the like button if you haven't already on your way out. Obviously helps the channel grow. And make sure to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 or ChazHD on Twitter to keep up to date with my content here on the channel. And don't forget to join our Discord, link below in the description or even in the chat to our. So it'd be great to have you in our ever-growing community. But guys, until my sprint race watch along tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. UK time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.